Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong, like every eye was measuring your worth, and you already knew their verdict? Evelyn Hart did. A single mother, a school teacher, wearing secondhand heels and a borrowed dress, at a room filled with diamonds and silence sharp enough to cut. They laughed at her not with malice, but with something worse, indifference, until the richest man in that room stood, took her hand, and called her his wife. But what if love wasn't the reason? What if the fairy tale began with a lie? If you were Evelyn, would you stay and fight for something uncertain, or walk away to protect the last piece of yourself? This is a story not about glamour, but about grit, about the quiet strength it takes to choose again, love, truth, and the dignity of being seen. Take a breath, lean in, and let your heart listen. If this story moves you, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes, a quiet story is the one that echoes the loudest. The shoes weren't new. They were secondhand, scuffed just enough that she had to buff them twice that morning. Evelyn Hart crouched on the cold tile floor of the staff locker room, adjusting the strap over her heel like she'd done 100 times before. Her fingers were steady, but her stomach hadn't stopped fluttering since she left Vermont at dawn. This wasn't her world. She knew it the moment she stepped into the towering lobby of the Whitestone Grand Hotel in Manhattan, marble floors that reflected the gold ceilings, chandeliers that looked like they cost more than her house, and staff who barely blinked as they glided by in black uniforms. She was one of them tonight. Not a guest. Not someone who belonged. Just a fill-in waitress for a fancy charity gala, and she was fine with that. At least, she told herself she was. She needed the money. Her daughter Clara's school tuition was past due. Her mother's health insurance premiums were going up again. One weekend of work here might help her buy more than soup and store-brand cereal. Besides, it wasn't forever. Just tonight. Don't make eye contact, Bethany had whispered earlier, the regular server she was filling in for. They don't see us. We're like wallpaper. Evelyn adjusted her uniform again, the white button-up shirt tight around her shoulders. She tugged it once, then picked up the tray of sparkling cider and walked into the grand ballroom. It was a sea of glitter, women in sleek gowns that shimmered like oil under the light, men in tuxedos, sipping aged bourbon and talking about markets and mergers. The air smelled of money, old and new. Evelyn moved between them with practiced quiet, offering drinks with a nod and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she heard it. Who let Cinderella in through the back door? The voice was sharp, amused, and unmistakably cruel. Evelyn didn't need to turn around to know it was directed at her. She turned anyway. A woman in a red designer dress, sleek, perfect, and terrifying, stood with a glass dangling from her fingers. Her name was Samantha Ellis. Evelyn had seen her face in a magazine once while waiting for the dentist, a philanthropist, a business magnate's daughter. Tonight, she looked more like a lioness who'd spotted a mouse. I mean, really, Samantha continued, stepping closer, her heels clicking across the marble. You're either in uniform or pretending you're not. Which is it, sweetheart? The room hushed around them, not completely, but enough for people to look, the kind of look that cuts deeper than words, judging, smirking. Evelyn swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She stood straight, one hand gripping the tray. Her voice was even. I'm just here to do my job. Samantha smiled, slow and wicked. Well, you're doing a fine job of entertaining us. She turned to the group behind her. Laughter followed. Evelyn's cheeks burned. She thought of Clara. Of the coat her daughter had grown out of, but still wore because Evelyn couldn't afford another one. She thought of the late nights at school, prepping lesson plans no one ever thanked her for. Of her own mother coughing in the next room while she cut coupons in silence. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. But fate wasn't done. Samantha took a step closer, tilting her glass. Oops. The wine didn't spill by accident. A crimson arc splashed across Evelyn's shirt, soaking through the fabric, trailing down her side like a wound. The room gasped. Someone laughed. Someone else whispered. Did she just... Evelyn stared down at the stain, deep red against white cotton. Her hands trembled now, just a little, and she blinked fast. She could walk out. No one would stop her. Maybe they'd forget her the moment she left. She could slip back into the world that never pretended to care and be invisible again. But then the music stopped. Or maybe it didn't, but it felt like it had, because the room went still. People straightened. A wave of silence spread from the entrance. Evelyn turned toward the commotion just in time to see him enter. Graham Whitaker. He walked like he didn't owe the world anything, and maybe he didn't. Black tuxedo, salt and pepper stubble, eyes the color of stormy skies, and a presence so commanding that the crowd unconsciously parted around him. Evelyn had heard of him. Everyone had. The tech billionaire who never smiled. The man who rarely gave interviews. A widower with a private fortune and a famously closed-off life. But tonight, he wasn't headed toward the stage, or toward the hosts, or even toward Samantha. He was walking straight toward Evelyn, and she didn't move. He stopped in front of her, took in the tray, the stain, the frozen guests. Then, without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a pristine, folded handkerchief. He handed it to her. "You shouldn't have to clean up someone else's mess," he said, voice low but firm. She blinked. "Use this." Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned to the crowd. "I'd like you to meet my wife." Silence, heavy, absolute. Evelyn's mouth dropped open. The tray slipped slightly in her grip. Samantha's glass shattered at her feet, and the world spun just a little faster. RTVC Nung Han Kung BND EA La PHN2. The spill that changed everything. VI Dai Ko Nung 1000 T. Tipini MCMXUK. Ginang VNM app. Sausis C. FUHPV Chang Ikang Hetren Fimsintu Iva Chui Nai Ginang C TTS. Pin Nice E Kau Trausi E Kau Chui Inlen MTNCME. Nang Ti Gin Happy Ginhan Hang. Cham Vao S Nang Ngang. BIRI va BTUCAIUCH IC. Everyone laughed at her until the richest man in the room called her his wife. Part 2. The spill that changed everything. For a moment, no one moved. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, suspended, disbelieved. My wife. Graham Whitaker didn't blink. He didn't stutter. He simply stood beside Evelyn Hart with the calm confidence of a man used to being listened to believed. He slipped his hand lightly to the small of her back. Not forceful, not claiming, but steady. Evelyn's brain scrambled. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but nothing came out. She looked up at him. He met her eyes. Calm, cool, and beneath all of it, a flicker of something softer, protective. She could hear the voices now, not loud, whispered, rushed. Did he say, "Wife, that woman, she's a server"? No way. She's wearing a name tag. Wait, was this planned? The world felt warped, tilted. Evelyn wasn't sure how her feet were still planted, how the tray hadn't dropped, how her body hadn't betrayed her shock. She glanced down at the handkerchief still clutched in her fingers' white silk, embroidered with initials. Expensive, too soft for someone like her. She should hand it back. She should say something. She should. Graham leaned closer. His voice was barely a breath. Play along, please. That word, please. He wasn't commanding her. He was asking. And Evelyn, who had spent years making her own decisions, who trusted no one who spoke like they were the sun, and the rest of the world merely revolved. She nodded. One, small, trembling nod, and everything shifted. Graham turned to face the murmuring room, his hand still gently guiding Evelyn forward. "I understand this is a surprise," he said, his voice clear and steady. "It wasn't how we planned to share our news, but life has its way of rewriting the script." There was a pause. Then, like sharks circling a drop of blood, the room moved in, flashes from phones, murmurs rising, the crowd surging forward with the scent of gossip in their nostrils. "Mr. Whitaker, are you really married? When did this happen? What about Samantha? Did you elope?" Evelyn felt her knees wobble. She wasn't just seen now, she was exposed. And then, another voice cut through the chaos. Cold, sharp, Graham. Samantha Ellis stood not 10 feet away, her voice brittle, her hands clenched around a crystal clutch purse. You can't be serious. Graham's gaze didn't falter. I'm always serious. Her eyes narrowed. You're making a fool of yourself. He tilted his head slightly. Only if I let you. The crowd was silent again, watching with the anticipation of a drawn curtain. Samantha stepped closer, her perfectly styled blonde hair no longer pristine. We were supposed to talk tonight, about the foundation, about the announcement. Things change. Graham. Her voice dropped. This woman, she's not like us. Evelyn's cheeks flushed again. The words hit like ice water, but Graham didn't flinch. No, she's not. She's better. It should have sounded like a line, a defense, a chess move, but the way he said it. For the first time, Evelyn saw Samantha falter. Her lips parted, then pressed into a thin, angry line. This isn't over. I'm sure it's not. Graham replied, but it is done. And with that, he turned back to Evelyn. Let's go. She let him guide her out of the ballroom, past silent guests and sideways stares. Her tray now held limply at her side, forgotten. The grand doors shut behind them with a soft thud, leaving the noise behind. They stepped into a marble hallway lined with oil paintings and vintage mirrors. The air was cooler. Still. Evelyn finally exhaled. What just happened? She whispered. Graham stopped, turned, his hands in his pockets now, the storm in his eyes less wild. I helped, he said simply. That was helping you were bleeding dignity, he said, softer this time. And I thought, maybe I could stop the bleeding. Evelyn stared at him. So you made up a lie, a big lie, in front of everyone. He shrugged slightly. They needed a story. I gave them one. Her voice cracked with disbelief. You told the richest, most connected people in New York that I was your wife. His reply came like a sigh. It got them to stop laughing, didn't it? She turned away, pacing now. Her shoes clicked on the polished floor. I don't know you, she said. You don't know me. I know you didn't deserve what they did. I know you stood your ground when anyone else would have crumbled. I know you walked into a room where no one wanted you and held your head up. She blinked at him. You were watching, I was listening. He replied. There's a difference. Evelyn folded her arms. What happens now? What do I tell my daughter? My school. What about she gestured to the closed doors? Then we handle it, Graham said. Together. Together, a beat passed. I've never done anything like this, she murmured. Neither have I. She looked up at him. Why me? His answer came so quietly she almost didn't hear it, because they laughed, and you didn't break. For a second, she felt seen, not pitied, not used, but seen. And she hated that part of her wanted to believe him. We'll need to talk, she said finally. This can't be real. He nodded. No. But maybe it can be right. And as they stood there, just the two of them in a hallway built for grandeur, Evelyn wondered if her quiet, careful life had just exploded into something she could never fold back up. The first thing Evelyn noticed was how quiet the penthouse was. No creaky floorboards, no hum of old radiators, no soft shuffling from her daughter's room down the hall. Just stillness. Big, expensive stillness. Graham had called a car black, sleek, and silent. The driver didn't ask questions. Evelyn sat in the back seat staring out the tinted window, the white handkerchief still clutched in her hand, the wine stain on her blouse already drying into something more permanent than she wanted to admit. She hadn't said much on the ride. Graham hadn't either. Now, in the middle of a space that looked like it belonged in a magazine more than a home, Evelyn stood barefoot on polished wood floors and tried to remember how breathing worked. This is temporary, she reminded herself under her breath. Just one night, just until this all blows over. Behind her, Graham moved through the room with practiced ease. He was pouring 2 glasses of water at a marble counter that stretched longer than her kitchen and dining room combined. "You should sit," he said, not looking at her. Evelyn didn't. Instead, she walked to the window. The city glittered below, 1,000 points of light in every direction. She could see the Hudson River, black and silver in the distance. Her hands tightened around the handkerchief. "You really told them I was your wife?" He exhaled. "Yes." "And now?" He finally turned to her. "Now we have to figure out how to make the lie believable, or find a way to end it without causing damage." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "To your reputation." "You mean, to yours, too?" She laughed, sharp and dry. "I don't have a reputation to protect. I'm a school teacher from Vermont who makes just enough to pay rent, feed a growing child, and pray nothing breaks in the car." His jaw tensed slightly, but he didn't respond. She turned back to the window. "So why do this? Why me?" Graham took a slow sip of water before answering. "Because Samantha Ellis was never going to stop. And because tonight, I saw someone stand up with grace when she was being torn down. That kind of dignity matters. You don't even know me. I know enough." Evelyn let the silence stretch. She could hear a clock ticking somewhere behind her. Not digital, the old-fashioned kind. Tick, tick, tick. "Finally," she said, "I have a daughter." Graham didn't blink. "I know. She's 9. Her name is Clara. She's smarter than I am and already sees through most people." "Good," he said simply. "You think she's going to believe this story, that I ran off and married a billionaire on a Thursday night in a room full of strangers? She doesn't have to believe it tonight." Evelyn turned to face him. "And what if I say no? What if I want to wake up tomorrow and pretend none of this ever happened? Then I'll handle the fallout, alone." The way he said it, calm, but with weight. "And the headlines, they're coming either way." She sat down then, not because she was tired, but because her knees finally gave up pretending they were fine. "Let's be honest," she said. "You didn't do this just to be noble." He hesitated, then nodded. "No, I didn't." Evelyn waited. "My board has been pressuring me to settle down." Samantha is their favorite option. Marrying her would tie 2 family empires together, strengthen the company, make investors happy, but I can't stand the idea. "So, you needed a distraction, a wife-shaped excuse." "Exactly." "And what do I get?" He walked over to the opposite couch, lowered himself into the leather seat, and spoke plainly. "A real salary, a private account, medical support, Clara's tuition, and whatever amount you'd need to stop worrying for the next few years." Evelyn's heart tightened. "You're offering me money to pretend to be your wife." "No, I'm offering you safety in a world that doesn't give it freely." There was something in his voice then. Not arrogance, not coldness, something old, tired. Evelyn looked down at her lap. "You know, it's funny. I was so angry when that woman spilled wine on me. Angry that the world keeps people like her at the top and people like me invisible. I never expected the rescue to be worse than the fall." Graham didn't flinch. "I understand." "No, you don't. You live in a world with doormen and wine cellars and people who wipe your shoes when it rains. I pack peanut butter sandwiches at 6 a.m. and try not to cry when the engine light turns on again." His voice was soft when he spoke. "I lost my wife to cancer 4 years ago. She was my world. I haven't invited anyone into my home since." Evelyn froze. He went on, slower. "This place, it's not a life. It's just walls and glass. I didn't rescue you tonight. You reminded me that people still matter." They sat in silence after that. The clock ticked on. Evelyn stood. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply said, "I need to call my daughter." He nodded. "I'll give you the room." She picked up the house phone already programmed with a list of lines and listened to the dial tone for a moment before pressing in her mother's number. "Hi, Mom. Can you put Clara on?" Her voice was steady. Her fingers were still trembling. The lie had already begun to reshape her life. And somehow, in the middle of it all, Evelyn didn't feel smaller. She felt like a woman on the edge of something big, something dangerous, something real. The document was heavier than it looked. Evelyn stared down at the stack of papers on the table in front of her. The print was neat, the font small, the language dense. Somewhere between the lines was the blueprint for the strangest year of her life. A marriage that wasn't a marriage, a deal that came with a signature instead of a kiss. She sat at the far end of the long walnut table in Graham Whitaker's home office. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Shelves of hardcovers lined the walls, books not for show, but worn from reading. There was a large clock ticking in the corner, quiet but steady. Across from her, Graham was dressed in a dark sweater and gray slacks, a legal pad open in front of him. He didn't look like a billionaire this morning. Just a man used to decisions, control, and consequences. "Take your time," he said, nodding toward the folder. "It's not a race." Evelyn flipped to the first page. Clause 1, duration. 1 year. 1 full year, she muttered. 52 weeks, Graham added, his tone even. She kept reading. Clause 2, residency. She would live here in the penthouse. They would maintain separate bedrooms. Boundaries would be respected. Evelyn glanced up. "You really put that in writing?" He lifted a shoulder. "You're walking into my world. The least I can do is make sure you feel safe in it." She returned to the page. Clause 3, public appearances. They would attend events together, charity galas, family functions, a photo here, a speech there. They would hold hands when expected. Smile on cue, fake it. Perfectly. Her stomach turned a little. "Do I get cue cards for the loving wife parts?" she asked, voice dry. "You'll be surprised how fast people believe what they want to see." She didn't know whether that made her feel better or worse. Clause 4, privacy. No interviews unless agreed upon. No social media posts without clearance. No disclosure to press or outsiders. Clause 5, compensation. Evelyn paused. $35,000 a month, she read aloud. Her voice caught slightly. "That's more than I've ever seen in a year." Graham said nothing. He just watched her. "There's a separate account for Clara," he said finally. "Her education, her health care, whatever she needs." Evelyn's eyes stung suddenly, but she blinked it away. "And my mother's treatments." "Covered. Already called the hospital this morning. They're reviewing options now." Evelyn looked up from the contract. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I've thought of what I can control." She let out a slow breath and turned to the last section. Clause 6, termination. If either party broke the agreement before 1 year, the contract was null and void. No money, no support, no continuation of any benefits. And after 1 year, a quiet divorce, no press, no drama, no obligations. Evelyn sat back in her chair, the document lying like a loaded question in front of her. She'd spent her life being careful, choosing stability over dreams, security over spark, and now, here was this man offering her the impossible, a year without struggle, a chance to lift her daughter into a better life, a break from survival. All she had to do was play pretend, just for a little while. "People don't get to live 2 lives, she said softly. "This feels like cheating fate." Graham leaned forward slightly. "You've spent years taking care of others. Maybe fate owes you something back." She looked at him then. Really looked. He was handsome, yes, but not in the way the magazines painted him. He looked tired, controlled. Like someone who had stopped hoping for real things and learned to live by contracts instead of connection. "What about feelings?" she asked. His brow lifted. "Feelings. If either of us starts feeling something that's not part of the deal, what happens then?" A pause. "Then we remind ourselves what this is," Graham said. "A contract, not a romance. And if that's not enough, then we adapt or walk away." Evelyn's hand hovered over the pen. Her heart thudded somewhere between her ribs and reason. She thought of Clara's chipped lunchbox, her mother's thinning hair, her bank account hovering at double digits. She thought of the way Samantha Ellis had looked at her like she was dust. She thought of the look in Graham's eyes when he handed her that handkerchief, the first time in years someone had tried to protect her without wanting something back. Except now, maybe he did want something, but at least he was honest about it. She picked up the pen, held it, lowered it, raised it again. She signed. Graham didn't smile. He just nodded once. "Then it's settled," he said. He reached across the table, not for her hand, but to gather the papers into a neat pile. Businesslike, efficient. But just before he stood, he paused. "There's one clause I didn't include," he said. She looked at him, curious. "I make coffee every morning at 6, strong, black. If you prefer tea, the kitchen is fully stocked." A corner of Evelyn's mouth lifted, just barely. Noted. The first dinner was awkward, not dramatic, not tense, just awkward in the way two strangers sitting across a 10-foot table should be, especially when one of them had just agreed to a 1-year marriage based on necessity, not affection. Evelyn sat with her hands folded in her lap, the linen napkins stiff across her knees. Across from her, Graham cut his salmon with methodical precision, as if it were a business deal rather than a meal. "I'm not allergic to anything," she offered. He looked up. "That's good to know." The clink of silverware filled the space. "I used to burn grilled cheese when Clara was little," she continued. "Now I can make chicken noodle soup from scratch." Progress. Graham's mouth quirked, almost a smile. "I've never cooked anything more complicated than coffee. That's a beverage. I'm aware." She sipped her water, let the silence settle again. It wasn't a bad silence, just unfamiliar, like two people trying on new shoes, waiting to see if the fit would blister or surprise them. The dining room was bathed in warm light, filtered through an antique chandelier. The windows stretched floor to ceiling, revealing the skyline like a living painting. Far below, the city buzzed on without them. "You always eat here?" she asked. "When I'm home. And when you're not, I work late. Grab something at the office." She tilted her head. "That sounds lonely." He set down his fork. Lonely is a choice. Sometimes it's the safer one. That made her pause. Graham didn't offer more. He simply went back to his plate, the rhythm of a man used to silence, used to boundaries, used to no one asking why. Evelyn took another bite, then set her fork down. "I don't want Clara here yet." He met her gaze. "Okay. I mean, not until I understand what this really is. I don't want her confused." "That's fair. She's been through enough." He nodded. "So have you." They didn't speak again until dessert peach cobbler, warm and soft, delivered by someone Evelyn hadn't even heard come in. She took one bite and closed her eyes. "That good?" Graham asked. "Dangerously good." He leaned back, watching her with a look that was hard to read. Not cold, not amused, just curious. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Because I'm not wearing diamonds, because you still have your sense of humor." Evelyn met his eyes and, for the first time since the gala, smiled without thinking. "Give it a week," she said. "You might wear it down." The next few days passed with a strange rhythm. They woke up in different rooms, passed each other in the kitchen, shared the occasional coffee, made polite conversation over dinner. It was like living with a neighbor you didn't hate but weren't sure you liked either. And yet, things shifted. Little things, like the way he started waiting for her to sit before starting his meal, or how she began leaving out a second mug when she made tea. There were no big moments, no fireworks, just the slow burn of routine, the quiet understanding of two people sharing space while pretending not to feel anything strange about it. Until Tuesday night. That's when it changed. Evelyn had come home late from visiting her mother in the rehab center. Clara was staying with her grandmother that week, something they'd agreed on until the media frenzy cooled down. Evelyn's feet ached. Her heart was heavier than usual. Her mom had good days and bad. That had been a bad one. She stepped into the penthouse, kicked off her shoes quietly, and was about to slip into her room when she noticed the light was on in the kitchen. Graham stood there barefoot, sleeves rolled up, frying something in a pan. "You cook now?" she asked, blinking. He glanced back. You mentioned grilled cheese. She walked in slowly. So, you're making one at midnight close. Cheddar and tomato on sourdough. No promises. Evelyn leaned against the counter. What's the occasion? He flipped the sandwich and said without looking at her, You looked tired when you walked in. She felt her chest tighten slightly. It was a rough day. He nodded. Want to talk about it? She didn't, but she also didn't leave. Instead, she accepted the plate he handed her, sat down at the counter, and took a bite. Crispy, golden, perfectly melted. Oh no, she said. This is better than mine. He smirked. Then I've peaked. They ate in silence again. But this time, it was different. Evelyn watched him under the soft kitchen light. There was something human in him tonight. Less armor, less calculation. Do you ever miss her? She asked suddenly. He looked up, startled. Your wife, the real one. He set down his sandwich. Yes, he said softly. Every day. I'm sorry. I know. She waited. Didn't push. Let the moment sit. Then, quietly, he added, Her name was Hannah. She hated grilled cheese. Thought it was too greasy. I used to make it anyway. Evelyn nodded slowly. It's okay to miss her. I don't want to forget her. You don't have to. They sat there for a long time. No more words. Just shared silence and two sandwiches disappearing between memories and something neither of them could name yet. Evelyn went to bed that night with a strange warmth in her chest. Not affection, not desire, not yet, but something like trust. And that, she knew, was far more dangerous. Evelyn didn't mean to snoop. It started with a missing charger, the one she kept tucked into the side pocket of her bag. She was sure she'd left it in the living room the night before, right after finishing a long video call with Clara, but when she searched there that morning, it was gone. Graham wasn't home, a board meeting uptown. He'd left early, coffee in hand, Ty half nodded, saying he'd be back by lunch. I won't be long, he'd said. She hadn't planned to wander, but the penthouse was quiet. And the charger might have been left in his office. He'd borrowed it once before. The door wasn't locked. It never was. Evelyn stepped inside carefully. The space felt heavier than usual, more private. His desk was neat, his handwriting crisp and precise on a notepad left open beside a leather portfolio. Books lined the shelves. Philosophy, technology, economics. And there it was. Her charger, tucked just behind the monitor. She reached for it. That should have been the end of it. But then she saw the folder, thick, dark blue. Tucked halfway beneath a stack of papers, the words Meridian Redevelopment Plan printed across the front. Something about it made her hesitate. She didn't know why she opened it. Curiosity, maybe boredom, or perhaps something deeper, a sense that this life she was temporarily living came with threads she hadn't pulled yet. The first few pages were standard projected budgets, zoning changes, acquisition lists, big numbers, clean graphs. But then, addresses, names, street blocks in Vermont. Evelyn blinked. That was her old neighborhood, Pine Hollow, the row of brick apartment buildings that had housed generations of working families. Her mother still lived a few blocks away. It was where Evelyn grew up, where she scraped her knees, rode her bike, skipped rope in the street. She flipped the pages faster now. Property acquisitions, dates, scheduled demolitions, redevelopment plans for high-end condos and commercial spaces. The language was cold, clinical, but the meaning was clear. Graham's company, his company, was planning to wipe out her old neighborhood, entire blocks, to replace them with glass towers and boutique stores. Her throat tightened. On page 9, she found a map with color-coded circles, green for properties already purchased, red for those in negotiation, yellow for pending legal action. One red dot stood where Mrs. Keating's house used to be. Evelyn remembered the woman, vividly silver bun, flowery aprons, always handing out lemon bars on Fridays. She'd died last year, but her grandson still lived there. Another red dot sat over the community center where Evelyn had painted her first mural, the one with kids' handprints forming a sun. Tears welled in her eyes. She kept turning. Then she saw her own block, her mother's building marked in yellow, and a line scrawled in the margin, emotional resistance expected. Monitor media exposure if marriage story escalates. Bish. Evelyn stepped back from the desk, the air thick in her lungs. She stared at the paper as if it might vanish. The folder slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. This wasn't just a business project. It was personal. And Graham had known. He'd known exactly who she was when he claimed her as his wife. He'd known where she was from, what that neighborhood meant, what it would do to her to find this out. This wasn't rescue. It was strategy. Graham walked in 20 minutes later. He didn't expect the room to be so quiet. Didn't expect Evelyn to be sitting on the edge of his desk, hands folded in her lap, the Meridian folder wide open beside her. He stopped mid-step. "Evelyn," he said cautiously. She didn't look up. "How long, Evelyn? How long have you known who I am? Where I'm from?" Graham's jaw tightened. "Since the gala." She laughed bitterly. "Of course. The mysterious billionaire with the perfectly timed handkerchief. You always save the women you're about to evict." He stepped forward. "It's not like that." "No." She stood now, voice trembling, "because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that." "I didn't plan any of this," he said. "The project's been in development for over a year, before I ever met you. But after you met me, after you married me, you didn't stop it either." He didn't answer. "You sat across from me at dinner, ate grilled cheese in the middle of the night, talked about your dead wife, looked me in the eye while planning to bulldoze the place I called home. I wasn't trying to deceive you. Then what were you doing?" Graham ran a hand through his hair, eyes weary, "Trying to protect both of us. I didn't want you caught in the crossfire." "You mean, you didn't want me interfering?" He didn't argue. Evelyn shook her head. "All this time, I thought maybe this thing between us was real." "But it's just another piece of your strategy, isn't it?" "It was real," he said quietly. "At least for me." She laughed again. "You don't get to say that. Not after this." He stepped closer. "I can pull out from the project. I was going to tell you, but you didn't." "No," he admitted. "I didn't." Evelyn stared at him, heart hammering. She didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal, or the fact that part of her still wanted to believe him, still wanted to forgive him, still wanted the warmth of grilled cheese at midnight and the feel of someone who saw her. But the Meridian folder lay open at her feet like a wound. And Evelyn Hart wasn't a woman who looked away from pain. "I need time," she said. He nodded, his face unreadable. "I'm going back to Vermont," she added, "to see my mother, to breathe air that doesn't smell like lies." "Evelyn." She turned away before he could finish, and for the first time since their story began, she didn't want him to follow. Vermont was colder than she remembered. Evelyn stood on the porch of her mother's small house, staring out over the same cracked driveway she used to chalk drawings on as a child. A single porch light buzzed above her, inside. Clara was asleep in the guest room, curled beside a pile of picture books. Her mother had finally settled into a light sleep, after hours of soft conversation and weak tea. But Evelyn's thoughts were still loud. She wrapped her coat tighter and sank onto the porch swing. It creaked softly beneath her. The Meridian folder had followed her here, tucked into her overnight bag like a ghost. She hadn't opened it again. Didn't need to. The truth was enough. Graham had known. He'd chosen strategy over transparency, and she'd almost let herself fall for him, fall into him without asking the questions that mattered. She didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or her own hope, because she'd hoped. It was raining when Graham showed up. She heard the car tires crunch gravel just past midnight. She didn't move from the swing. He stepped into the yellow glow of the porch light, his coat damp, his hair wet. No umbrella, no driver, just him. Evelyn didn't say a word, neither did he. For a long time, they just stared at each other. Two people with too much between them and not enough words to cross it. Finally, she spoke. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to be." "To what?" "Explain the unexplainable." "To talk." She stood slowly, arms crossed. "You don't talk, Graham. You control, you negotiate, you hand out contracts like life is a boardroom. His jaw tightened. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. I was trying to manage the fallout. Fallout, she repeated, her voice rising. You talk like my entire neighborhood is a risk report. These are people, families, places that matter. I know that now. No, you knew it then. You just didn't care. I did care, he snapped, louder than he meant to. The silence that followed was sharp. Graham exhaled. His voice dropped. I just didn't know how to show it. Evelyn looked away. That's not good enough. I called off the project, he said. Her head turned sharply. What? 2 days ago, I met with the board. I pulled the funding, redirected the team. We're out. Evelyn blinked. Why? His answer came quietly. Because I looked at what we were building and realized it came at the cost of everything you stand for. And that changed your mind. You did. She swallowed hard. He took a step closer. I was building a life that made money, made sense, kept me safe. But you made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Guilt, regret, and then something worse. She raised a brow. Worse, hope. The word hung in the air like breath on cold glass. Evelyn's voice cracked. You lied to me. I did, he said, and I'd take it back if I could, but I can't. All I can do is ask for a second chance to tell you the truth. She shook her head. This isn't a fairy tale, Graham. I know. You can't just undo what's been done. I'm not asking you to forget, he said. I'm asking you to believe that I'm trying. She looked at him, then truly looked. He wasn't the man from the gala anymore, not the composed billionaire with a silk handkerchief and a perfect line. He was wet, tired, unshaven, human. And somehow, that hurt more. Do you love me? She asked suddenly. The question stunned him. He started, then paused. Evelyn's eyes didn't waver. Because if you don't, then walk away. Let's end this lie tonight. Graham stepped forward. His voice was raw. I don't know if I even know what love is anymore. But I know this. I can't stop thinking about the way you laugh when you're tired. The way Clara grabs your hand like she's claiming you from the world. The way you looked at me like I was someone worth telling the truth to. She felt her breath catch. He went on. I think about that night in the kitchen, the grilled cheese, the quiet. And I think maybe I'd trade every dollar I've ever made for just one more night like that. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't want to love someone who lies to me. Then let me earn it back, he said. Every day. For as long as you'll let me. Evelyn looked down. The porch was quiet, the rain steady. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like to say yes, to let him back in, to start again, but this time without contracts or pretense. Then she looked up. I'm not ready, she whispered. He nodded slowly. Okay, but I want to be. And that, finally, was the truth she could live with. Graham stepped back, his eyes never leaving hers. I'll wait, he said, and then he walked back to his car in the rain. Evelyn stood on the porch, heart pounding, 1,000 pieces shifting inside her. She didn't know if they'd fit back together. But maybe, just maybe, she wanted to try. The boardroom had never felt this cold. Graham sat at the head of the long glass table in the Whitaker Holdings headquarters, hands clasped loosely in front of him. Around him sat 8 people, some of them family, most of them shareholders, all of them waiting for him to speak. He could feel the weight of it pressing down, generational legacy, investor expectations, the cold, hard calculus of power. You called this meeting, his cousin Alan said. So let's hear it. Graham looked at each of them. They weren't bad people, just people with their eyes fixed on spreadsheets instead of sidewalks. They didn't grow up walking past Mrs. Keating's lemon bars. They didn't know the smell of Evelyn's old neighborhood in the fallwood smoke, cider, cracked pavement, and hope. They didn't know what it meant to give something up for someone who mattered more. I'm stepping away, Graham said. A beat. Silence. Then murmurs. From what Alan asked, from day-to-day operations, from the board, from everything at least for a while. You can't be serious. Graham's voice was steady. I am. What about the quarterlies, the acquisition proposals? We're 2 months from final sign-off on the Langston project. I won't be part of it. The room fell into stunned silence. I've already filed the papers, Graham continued. Effective immediately. You'll have full authority to continue operations, but I'm removing myself from strategic planning, development, and public relations. His aunt leaned forward. Is this about her? He didn't flinch. This is about me. Because of a woman who, let's be honest, was never supposed to be part of this family. Graham's voice sharpened. She's not the outsider. She's the reason I started to see what this place had become. Alan scoffed. You're risking everything for some fairy tale. No, Graham said. I'm choosing to stop living a lie. He stood then. Straightened his blazer, looked every one of them in the eye. I built this company, but somewhere along the way, I built a wall between who I am and what I do, and I'm done with that. Then he walked out, leaving behind stunned silence and a chair that no longer had his name on it. Evelyn stood in the hallway of the elementary school, watching Clara pin her art project onto a bulletin board with quiet pride. Her daughter's ponytail bobbed with each movement, a line of blue crayon streaking across her cheek. She's a lot like you, Mrs. Lowell, the art teacher, said gently. Evelyn smiled. She's stronger. Her phone buzzed. It was a message. Stopped the project. Stepped away from the board. No more suits. No more scripts. Just me. If you're ready, I'm here. Graham. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then tucked it into her bag and walked toward her daughter. Clara turned, grinning. Mom, look. Evelyn knelt beside her, hugging her tightly. The weight of the last few weeks pressed against her chest, but there was something softer under it now. Something she hadn't felt in a while. Peace. Graham didn't know if she'd come. He was back at the penthouse, standing on the balcony as evening fell over the skyline. The city glowed below. He wore no suit, just jeans and a flannel shirt. His hair hadn't been combed since morning. He had been a man who controlled everything: meetings, narratives, public image. But tonight, he couldn't control this, and he didn't want to. He just waited. And then, he heard the elevator chime, the sound of soft footsteps. He turned. There she was. No makeup, no drama, no expectations. Just Evelyn. A little tired, a little guarded, a lot beautiful. Hi, she said. Hi, he replied. She took a few steps forward, arms crossed loosely. You really gave it all up. He nodded. All of it. Why? Graham took a breath. Because every version of success I've known has been about winning. Conquering, outperforming. But you taught me something I didn't even know I'd forgotten. She tilted her head. That love, he continued, doesn't always look like roses or champagne. Sometimes it looks like grilled cheese at midnight, or silence that doesn't feel heavy, or the way your daughter holds your hand like it's the center of the universe. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. I don't have a plan anymore, he added. No contract, no script, just me. She took another step. You left the board, she asked again. Quieter. I left the version of myself that thought money was enough. A long pause. Then she smiled. Small, tentative, real. And now. Graham said, I wait, for as long as it takes. Evelyn looked at him for a long time. And finally, she said, come inside. I made soup. Graham blinked. Soup, I figured if we're starting over, we might as well start where it matters: dinner. He laughed softly and followed her in. This time, no cameras, no gala, no lie. Just a man and a woman, quietly rewriting what love might look like. The soup was warm, not just in temperature, but in meaning. Evelyn stirred the pot slowly, watching steam rise like small, invisible stories curling into the ceiling. Carrots, potatoes, and shredded chicken swirled together, humble, honest food. the kind that didn't need to impress, only comfort. Graham sat at the small breakfast table behind her, hands folded quietly. He hadn't said much since she invited him in. Neither had she. They didn't need to. Not yet. Evelyn ladled soup into 2 bowls and brought them to the table. No candlelight, no background music. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the hush of 2 people learning how to breathe in the same space again. She took a seat across from him. Their knees almost touched. Graham tasted the first spoonful, then glanced up with a half smile. "This is better than grilled cheese." She gave him a look. "Don't push it." He chuckled, not loudly, just enough to make the air feel softer. They ate for a while in silence. Then Evelyn said, without lifting her gaze, "You left a world behind." He nodded. "You left something I know you worked your whole life to build." "I did. For me, for myself," he said gently. "You just helped me see why I needed to." She finally looked up. "I've spent years standing on my own 2 feet," she said. "Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I didn't have the luxury of depending on anyone. I know. I learned to fix my own car, unclog my own sink. I even figured out how to sew Clara's Halloween costume last year by hand. You know what that does to a person?" Graham waited. "It makes you hard to love, because you're always preparing to be left." His brow furrowed. "You're not hard to love. You say that now." He reached across the table, not for her hand, but for her attention. "I'm not leaving," he said. Evelyn stared at him. "You don't owe me anything anymore," she said. "Not money, not guilt. You could walk away and be clean." "I'm not looking for clean," he replied. "I'm looking for true." The words sank deep. She rose, walked to the window. Outside, the city glowed. Inside, she felt like her heart was finally waking up after a long winter. "I didn't expect to fall for you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to be worth falling for." That made her turn. Graham stood now, slowly, carefully, as if not to startle the moment. They met halfway between table and window. "I'm not perfect," he said. "Neither am I. I still don't know if I deserve you. I still don't know if I can fully trust you." A beat. "But," she added, "I want to try." He exhaled, something almost like relief softening the line of his shoulders. "I don't want to keep pretending," Evelyn said, "not even to ourselves." "Then let's stop pretending." She looked into his eyes. "I want to be here because I choose it. Not because I need saving, not because it's easy, but because I see you, and I see the man you're trying to be. I'll keep becoming him," he promised. "If you'll keep watching." Tears welled up again, but she didn't hide them. "I want a real life," she said. "Not a glamorous one, just real, messy, true." With soup and silence and grilled cheese at midnight, they stood there, 2 people not promising forever, just today and tomorrow, and the choice to stay together that weekend. Clara returned home. The penthouse looked different now, not in design, but in feeling. Evelyn had opened the windows, let in light, let in laughter. Clara ran straight to Graham when she saw him, stopping just short of a hug. "Are you still pretending to be married to my mom?" Graham knelt to her eye level. "No," he said. "We're not pretending anymore." She stared at him, then looked at Evelyn. "Okay, but I still get the last cookie tonight." Evelyn smiled. "Deal." That night, they ate on the floor. 3 mismatched bowls, 1 fuzzy blanket, a dog that Clara insisted on naming Pickle, even though he wasn't theirs yet. Evelyn rested her head on Graham's shoulder, and for the first time, staying didn't feel like surrender. It felt like coming home. The first real day of their life together began not with a kiss, but with a knock. It was Sunday morning, gray with soft rain tapping against the windows. Evelyn was still in pajamas, her hair messy, her feet bare on the hardwood floor. She was cradling a mug of coffee, warm in her hands, when she heard the sound. 3 short knocks. Graham looked up from the couch where he was helping Clara assemble a puzzle. "You expecting anyone?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head. She opened the door. A woman stood there, early 30s, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, holding a notepad and microphone. "Ms. Hart," she asked gently. "Rachel Foster, the New York Standard." "I'm sorry to intrude, but I was hoping for a moment of your time." Evelyn froze. The reporter shifted, sensing the discomfort. "I know this must be a lot, but people want to understand. It's not just about your marriage to Mr. Whitaker. It's about the story behind it, the truth behind the headlines." Evelyn glanced over her shoulder. Graham was standing now, silent, watching, not interfering. She turned back to the reporter. "What truth? That you were ridiculed, humiliated, and then chosen? People say you were just a pawn in a corporate game, that the richest man in the room used you, that it wasn't real." Evelyn breathed slowly. "It was never about being chosen," she said softly. "It was about choosing to stay, choosing to see the good in someone even after they failed, choosing forgiveness when anger felt easier." The reporter opened her notebook. "May I quote you?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "You can quote this. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just quiet people showing up, again and again." She closed the door gently. That afternoon, they packed a picnic, just a simple one. 3 sandwiches, 2 apples, 1 thermos of hot cocoa, and a bag of marshmallows Clara had insisted on bringing in case the world ends today. They took a drive north, out of the city, past highways, past memories, into green hills and quiet. They ended up at a small lake Evelyn remembered from her childhood, a forgotten place. No crowds, just reeds swaying in the wind and water soft like glass. They laid out a blanket. Clara ran to the edge to collect rocks. Evelyn sat beside Graham, the wind playing with strands of her hair. "For the first time," she said, "this feels like ours. Not borrowed, not bargained, just ours." Graham looked out at the water. "You make ordinary things feel like miracles." She laughed gently. "I'm a public school teacher. We perform small miracles on a tight budget every day." He smiled, then grew serious. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. "The lie, the start, the pain?" She thought for a moment. "No," she said, "because without all of it, we'd still be pretending. And I don't want pretend anymore." He reached for her hand, warm against his. "I don't either." As the sun began to dip behind the trees, Clara climbed into Evelyn's lap. "Mom," she said, "is Graham my dad now?" Evelyn looked at Graham. He waited, not answering for her. "That depends," Evelyn said. "Do you want him to be?" Clara nodded. "He packs better lunches than you." Evelyn pretended to gasp. "Excuse me." Graham laughed, heart full, eyes wet. Clara leaned into him. "Can I call you Dad?" He blinked. 1,000 things caught in his throat. "Yes," he whispered. "You can." That night, back at the penthouse home, they put Clara to bed, read 2 stories, kissed her forehead, turned off the lights. Evelyn and Graham sat on the balcony. No contracts, no plans, just stars. And breath, and a kind of silence that didn't need filling. Evelyn rested her head against his shoulder. "People still laugh at stories like ours," she said. "Let them," he replied. "We're not living it for them." She smiled, eyes closed. "No," she said. "We're living it for us. And this time, no one was pretending. Sometimes. The most powerful love stories are not the ones that begin with passion, but the ones that survive truth. Evelyn's journey reminds us that dignity is not in how others see us, but in how we choose to see ourselves. Even when life offers you something glittering, you have the right to ask, is this real? Is it kind? Is it true? And even when trust is broken, healing is still possible if we choose to stay, not because we must, but because we believe again. In a world that often values wealth over worth, may we remember the bravest thing a person can do is to love without needing to be rescued, and to forgive without forgetting who they are. So whether you're 25 or 75, if you've ever been overlooked, misunderstood, or had to start over, this story is yours too. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart, Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because stories like these, quiet, tender, real, are meant to be passed on. And maybe someone out there needs to hear it today.